Assalamu alaikum. So this is the other adab for eating and drinking. Be right, stay right, eat and drink with your right. The evidence for this is the Prophet ﷺ and what he had said in the hadith. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا أكل أحدكم فليأكل بيمينه وإذا شرب فليشرب بيمينه فإن الشيطان يأكل بشماله ويشرب بشماله رواه مسلم. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, if any of you eats, let them eat with their right hand. Now, generally speaking, the scholars had differences of opinions on whether this makes eating with the right hand obligatory or whether it is liked. Most of the scholars regarded it as obligatory because of the other hadith when the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahabi, the Prophet's companion, to eat with the right hand, and then he said that he cannot. And the Prophet ﷺ told him, mastata'at. And from there, he could not ever move his right hand to eat or even do anything else with it. So, وَإِذَا شَرِبَ فَلْيَشْرَبْ بِيَمِينِهِ. And if you would drink, drink with your right hand. فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ يَأْكُلُ بِشِمَالِهِ. Now, scholars had different opinions on whether that shaitan actually literally eats with his left hand, or whether that if the person were to eat with his left hand, that the shaitan would then accompany him in his food and therefore reducing the blessing. So that فَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ يَأْكُلُ بِشِمَالِهِ, and drinks with his left hand and eats with his left hand. Scholars had differences of opinions on whether that literally means that he eats, that shaitan eats with his left hand. Therefore, a person eating with his left hand becomes just like the shaitan in his behavior. The second opinion is that this is more of an explanation that if you were to eat with your left hand, then the shaitan would accompany you because of you disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and eating from your right and eating from your the hand that you should be eating with, which is your right hand. So by you considering a different behavior away from the behavior Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had asked you to eat with, then you're actually taking a different stance. And therefore the shaitan is going to accompany you for taking the wrong stance. The other hadith, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, eat with your right and start with what is in front of you. So this is another hadith where Umar ibn Abi Salama radiallahu anh, the Sahabi Umar ibn Abi Salama is basically Salama's husband. Salama is the Prophet Prophet's wife. She was married to Abu Salama and had a number of different children from Abu Salama who later got killed in the Battle of Uhud. One of Abu Salama / Salama's children, his name was Umar. He said, كنت غلاما في حجر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. In another narration, في حجري. So كنت غلاما في حجر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وكانت يدي تطيش في الصحفة. فقال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا غلام سم الله وكل بيمينك وكل مما يليك. فما زالت تلك طعمتي بعد. رواه البخاري ومسلم. Means that this hadith is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, and this hadith is actually the highest level of authentic hadith that any narration could be. So this is muttafaqun alayh in another term. What does Umar ibn Abi Salama was actually considered the Prophet's stepson? He said, I was in the Prophet's guardianship, or I was in the Prophet fi hajri would mean in the guardianship of the Prophet fi hijri would mean that he was with the Prophet in his own place, or at least within fi hijri, meaning in his chamber. So, or fi hijri could also mean on his lap. So and the Prophet was present. Wa kanat yadi. He was explaining my hand تطيش في الصحفة. So my hand was rotating, was floating above and over the different plates that were there. So the Prophet ﷺ sees him and he says, Ya ghulam. Ya ghulam would mean, O son or O young man, Sammillah. Say Bismillah before you eat. وَكُلْ بِيَمِينِكَ, and eat with your right hand, and we eat from what is in front of you. So eat from what is in front of you, meaning that eat from your portion, the portion that is in front of you, and not from someone else's portion. So if you happen to have a plate that has different varieties of foods and people are sharing, but the side that is in front of someone else probably has something that you don't have, such as, let's say, spaghetti maybe on that side, or maybe on that side there are more vegetables, then in that situation you can ask the person to toss it for you, or if it's common and people actually eat from that portion that's not in front of you, you can actually eat from what is in front of, if this was acceptable in that culture. So ya ghulam, سم الله وكل بيمينك, O son or O young man, say Bismillah before you eat with your right hand, and eat from what is in front of you. He says later in comments that since the Prophet ﷺ had taught me how to apply the adab and the manners of eating, that was always the situation, that was always how I had taken my meal. This is second